Fantastic, the Tactile City. Okay, next up, the founder of Float, Sascha Mombartz. Come on out, Sascha.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I started Float out of my curiosity for the city. There's so much out there that we see but know so little about. What is this huge blue thing that I've walked by a million times? I finally looked it up, and I quickly discovered that everything out there has a story to tell, a fascinating story, often a surprising story too. And these are stories that can tell us about the city today, how it functions, about its past, about the people that worked and lived there, about their struggles, but also about their successes. Jane Jacobs talked about social capital, the network of people, the citizens of our city. They are our most valuable asset, and what they leave behind are their stories. And that's what Float is trying to do, tell stories about people and places. So here we have one of New York City's oldest manholes. It's from 1866. It wasn't connected to the sewage system, but to New York City's fresh water supply. An aqueduct brought water from upstate New York, 42 miles long, to a huge reservoir that used to be on Bryant Park. And from there, it was distributed throughout the city underground. You can still see the foundations of that reservoir inside of the New York Public Library. And Edgar Allan Poe, he liked to walk around the peripheral and enjoy the view of the city. And just around the corner from there, we have this building entrance, an installation called Plain Dress by James Turrell, the same guy who created Spiral Jetty. And he was able to transform this potentially boring office lobby into an experiment of light and space. And you can go there anytime and enjoy it. No need to go to MoMA and stand in line. There's also the Red Square, the Red End Square development by Michael Rosen, which he thought it would be most appropriate to put a statue of Lenin on top of the Red Square. The statue also faces and waves towards Wall Street. It's not the only tongue-in-cheek element of the building. If you notice the clock behind him by Tibor Kalman, all the numbers are shuffled. So the building is full of these beautiful details, and imagine if we had more developers like this that would prod and provoke us to think about the things around us. There's also the Cooper Union. There we go. Which, when it was built in 1859, was the highest building in New York City. It had 8 floors. Think about that. It also had an elevator shaft before elevators even existed. All of that thanks to Peter Cooper's relentless inventiveness. He also ran for president. He didn't win. But together with his wife, he invented Jell-O. So, amazing, right? So these stories are everywhere. In front of it, we have the Alamo. Underneath Cooper is the Great Hall, where Abraham Lincoln gave his infamous speech. He won the election. And next to it, in the Astor Place subway station, we have murals by Milton Glaser, who designed the I Heart New York graphic. So these stories are everywhere. The tricky thing is to see them, but also to know their story, the story of all these artifacts that are throughout the city. And I want to point out one in particular that maybe all of you have walked over. It's at the corner of Broadway and Prince. It's this beautiful chisel on the sidewalk by Japanese artist Ken Hiratsuka. He did this in 1984. Just a quick show of hands. Who's walked over this corner? It's perpendicular from the Dean and DeLuca. People always know where Dean and DeLuca is, but yeah, like almost everybody. Who has actually noticed this piece on the corner? Oh, okay, a few, that's great. Very perceptive. Who knows the story? Wow, okay. Nobody, I guess. So that's what happened to me, and I thought, well, you know, there has to be something. And so I searched the internet and the printed world, and all I could really find was this photograph. Oops. Something happened, but there was no text, no description, nothing. Luckily, Ken has a website, so I emailed him. He wrote back, and so he told me this story. He had come from Japan to the US to escape from the very rigid art system there, and he was totally inspired by all of the graffiti around New York. And he had noticed that people had chiseled into the sidewalk. You'll see these little dimple marks all around. They're basically there to make the granite less slippery when it's wet or icy. And he thought, oh, other people are doing this. I can do this. It's, you know, it's not really destructive. It's kind of enhancing the sidewalk. So he did one in Brooklyn, and then he discovered this corner in Soho. Now remember, this is 1984. Soho was still a dark and dangerous place. Taxis didn't really go below Houston. And this corner, the lights were blown out, and when he saw this corner, he said, this corner needs some life. So he was totally scared getting caught by the police and being sent to Japan, back to Japan, so he always brought a lookout with him. And this one time he brought another friend, a photographer. The problem was the police snuck up on him driving up Prince Street against traffic. So he didn't notice them until they were right in front of him with their lights on, and he was so shocked that he just looked up, said hello, and smiled. And if you look closely, you'll see the police officer looked at him, looked at what he was doing, smiled back, and kept on driving. Pretty amazing. It's great that that actually happened and that we have a photo of that. So thanks to this police officer, we have this piece, and obviously Ken. He was petrified to go back and complete it. He said, I'm not going to finish it. But 3 months later, his urge was there, and he went back and finished the piece. And Ken said something really beautiful. He said, you know, his work is out there. He wants to stop the busy people running by for a moment or a minute to get them to forget their worries and their struggles and maybe be delighted or inspired to do something else. And I think that all the stories, all these artifacts that are out there, they have stories, and they can tell us a lot about the city, but they can also transport us to a different time and place. So please join me, download the app. We have an app that tells you all about the city. We also have a newsletter. We're working on a podcast about Ken. And if you like what we're doing, you have some ideas or would love to collaborate, please find me. I'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you.